to order. First item on the agenda is that we stand and for the national anthem, if you please.
Oh, Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all of us command.
Car ton bras s'est porté l'épée, il s'est porté la croix. Ton histoire est une épopée des plus brillants exploits.
God keep our land glorious and free. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
Thank you. Please be seated. I would like to begin by reading a safety notice. In the event of an emergency, please evacuate council chambers to the nearest exit through the chamber doors and obey all instructions given. If assistance is required, please see Madam Clerk. And once you have evacuated the building, please gather in the front parking lot outside of Town Hall. Also, please ensure that if you haven't already, please place your cell phones on silent or turn them off. And lastly, the Town of Lincoln Council meetings are posted on our YouTube channel. Closed captioning is also available on all our videos by selecting the closed captioning button on the bottom right of the video. The Town of Lincoln is part of the Niagara region and is situated on treaty land. This land is steeped in the rich history of the First Nations, such as the Haudenosaunee, the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, including the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. There are many First Nations, Métis and Inuit people from across Turtle Island that live and work in Niagara today. The regional municipality of Niagara and the town of Lincoln stand with all Indigenous people, past and present, in promoting the wise stewardship of the lands on which we live. Members of council are in attendance, both in person and, I believe, remotely, Madam Clerk?
Not remote right now.
Not remote at the moment, all right. We also have staff attending both in person and remotely. And also in attendance this evening, we have Tim Dobby of Tim L. Dobby Consultant Limited. Members, do you have any recommendations, any amendments to the order of the agenda? There being none, are there any declarations of interest? Do any members have any announcements? Please remember that you have a limit of 3 items. We have no proclamations this evening. Oh, Councillor Timmers.
Thank you, Mary Ston. I was a little late getting my microphone on there. I do have some announcements. On Saturday, October 28th, we attended the Niagara West Fire Services. A number of councillors were there, and you were there, Madam Mayor, and our clerk, and our CAO. It was just a fantastic day we spent with the firefighters, and absolute respect for the work that the men and women do there. And I appreciate the time that they spent teaching us a lot of great skills, and we learned a lot. So the second event, the same day, I attended the grand opening of Upper Deck in Vineland on Victoria Avenue. And it's actually a 2-floor. It's the bottom and the second floor, which is all complete. And they've been open for about a month, and they have about 12 youth that are attending on a regular basis, as well as a homeschool network uses the space as well once a week, I was really quite happy to hear that. And I think that's it for me. Thank you very much.
That's great. Thank you very much. I see no other speakers at this time. Item number 8 is proclamations, and we have no proclamations this evening. We have no recognition and achievements. We're now on item 10.1, and we have our CAO, Mike Kirkopoulos, with a presentation regarding governance and shared services. And he will be joined by Tim Dobby, the president of Tim L. Dobby Consulting Limited, to provide an informational update. However, before we begin, I've been advised by the clerk that council has been provided confidential Appendix B in relation to item 10.1 that outlines confidential comments made during the closed session meeting that occurred on August 9th, 2023, in accordance with Section 239, subsection 3.1 of the Municipal Act. And according to the Municipal Act, and on the advice of Madam Clerk, there is an additional step to be taken by council. In order to discuss publicly and in accordance with the Municipal Act, council will need to pass a motion to release the report publicly before moving forward. If council is not comfortable proceeding with this discussion in open session, then council can choose to move into a closed session after we discuss the public presentation. I have a motion, and I am going to ask Councillor Murray if she would be the mover. And I'm asking Councillor Reimer if you would be the seconder. Thank you very much. And the motion is as follows, that council approve to publicly release the confidential Appendix B related to item 10.1, provided by Tim L. Dobby Consulting Limited, to be discussed in open session. Madam Clerk, would you please open the vote?
No? Okay, so I have opened the vote, Madam Mayor.
Okay.
And I'll close that vote. And that carries, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Council, the motion has carried, and we will now proceed with the CAO's presentation regarding shared services and provincial government update and the newly publicly approved information update report from Tim L. Dobby Consulting Limited. Mr. CAO, please go ahead.
Through you, Madam Mayor, thank you for the opportunity to be before you this evening. Tim and I are going to, I think, come to the podium. We're going to get the presentation pulled up, and the order will probably be, I'm going to just make some quick opening comments, giving you a little bit of context. Tim's going to take you into a little bit of what we're hearing from the provincial government and a little context, picking up somewhat on some of the comments that were made towards the tail end of the Tri-Council meeting. And then I'm going to give you a bit of an update on shared services here across Niagara and within the region. And then we'll be open to take any questions that you may have.
Okay, thank you very much. Go ahead, Mr. CAO. Welcome, Mr. Dobby.
Yeah. Next slide. Oh, here it is. Right. Yeah, oh, I can work it, yeah. So good evening, members of council, members of the public, and I do want to welcome Tim here as well, no stranger to our council for sure, and his partner, Lorianne, that's here as well, that's assisted with this project. As I mentioned in my opening comments, we're here to talk to you really about two things. A little bit of a lay of the land in terms of where we're at, albeit a number of months ago, I think there was some indication that governance was a little more top of mind for the provincial government. A number of things have transpired over the last number of months, and I would suggest that it's probably taken a little bit of a back burner. So Tim's going to give you a little bit of, I think, background and history in terms of what we're hearing. You'll see in this presentation that we've got in front of you, we talk a little bit about Peel and some of the learnings that we're seeing from Peel and what that indicates for potential governance and governance reform within the rest of the province. And as I said, then I will get into a little bit of some of the opportunities that we've got before us. So I'll turn it over to Tim now, and then I'll be back in a few minutes.
Okay. Thank you, Mike, and Mayor and members of council. It's a pleasure to be here. I don't have too much to give you tonight, other than I wanted to do a brief introduction and then talk to you about what we've heard from the province and where they are right now. So by way of introduction, we're here tonight to talk about the status of the provincial governance changes possible for Niagara. And when we start to talk about governance changes, that is a time when the staff get worried about it, when members of council can be impacted by it. It is not a topic that doesn't have with it a lot of things that can get people perhaps angry at times, excited at times, or somewhere in between. So we are taking this really seriously and trying to help the 3 municipalities that we work for as best we can. We have heard that the province, you'll recall, said that September 30th, they were going to announce facilitators for the many regions that they would study. And of course, they didn't do that. I have a more current update for you, and I'll give you that very shortly. We did have the One Tri-Council meeting. I was very impressed. I must say it was the first multiple council meeting I had ever been involved with. I was really amazed and pleased how people were very cordial. There was really no issues at the time. And that could have been because we were in the early stages of talking about what thoughts might be or what comments might be. I see that tonight you've made the 14 comments and you have made them open. At the other 2 municipalities, I read them and went through them. I'd be happy to do that, but that is your call. I would like, Madam Mayor, to talk about what the province is prepared to do and what they're doing. And so I got this update. I'm also a advisor to a company called Pathway, the Pathway Group. They're a government relations group. And so they provided this a couple of days ago. And basically what is happening is there is a committee at the province of Ontario, part of the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing, and they have started to hear delegations on the governance issues in Durham Region, York Region, Simcoe County, Halton Region, Waterloo Region, and Niagara Region. And the only dates that have been set were set for Simcoe, and they met in Barrie on Monday. And there was a full list of people who were going forward to present governance, or comments on governance, or I presume governance options with them. And they, I got a copy of the agenda, and I even noticed that the mayor of Oakville was making a presentation in Barrie, which seemed unusual to me, but apparently you can go to any of these. So I do not know, however, and nor can I find out yet, what the dates are for these other regions and Niagara region in particular. But they do comment then that there will be 2 cities that the committee of the ministry will will be in Niagara, and they will take delegations from whoever wants to give those delegations. I do know that the meeting on Monday was a long meeting, about 7 hours long, and there were a lot of people who made presentations. So it does seem like they are back on, but they're changing the way they do it from the facilitator idea. They used a facilitator in 2018 when they did the review of Niagara. But they have decided they're going to do it this way. So I just wanted to raise those two things and to say, if you would like me to go through the 14 points, I can do that. That would be totally your call. So I guess my message to you tonight is I think the province is back on. They certainly had a house full of visitors for their first committee meeting. If you think about 2 all-day meetings in 6 counties, that's 12 of them, and presumably this committee does more than just this. So this is going to move, but who knows whether it move quickly or whether it would move slowly. As you know, I was in West Lincoln on Monday night and Grimsby on Tuesday. We did go over those points, but I said to them that if there is a desire to make a governance option, put together a governance option, you really should think about making that presentation to this committee when they come to Niagara. And as soon as we can get the dates from them, we'll pass them on to you. So, Mike, I don't know.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Dobbie and CAO, Mike, would you please make your comments now to council, and then we'll see if there's any questions that councilors have.
So through you, Madam Mayor, do you want me to go through all my comments, or do you want just comments specific to the subjects that Tim was discussing?
Well,
And then we
let's-
can take questions, or do you want to just finish the presentation, and which we can do as well?
I want to make sure that there's some fluidity to the presentation so that we don't lose that. And then we can ask the
Sure.
questions. We'll have council ask questions. If we need to go back to clarify anything, we can do that. So why don't you just continue on and give us your piece of this.
Sure, maybe I'll open up, I think, my comments on shared services to really or I think to highlight for council, it's important that we're having these conversations. I think whether there be some concern or some apprehension from some or all municipalities in Niagara as to why we may be having these conversations, are we too soon in having them? I think it's always important when we're looking at the changing landscape across the province and how quickly sometimes decisions get made, that at least we're having these conversations. So we spoke a little bit about the tri-council meeting. I think the approach we took this time was a little different. Let's have some more, I would say, intimate conversations around our own council tables. Maybe hear from council some of your comments, some of your concerns, things that we can take back as respective CAOs in each of the municipalities. There is a CAO working group that is meeting on a fairly regular basis so that we can take back to the table. I've seen some questions get posed as to, well, are we too far out ahead of this? Are we too quickly trying to come up with a position? Why is the West taking a position potentially when others are not taking a position? I think my comment to members of council on all of that would be, we're not necessarily taking a position. I think we want to be ready should there be a position. There are a number of municipalities that are already talking about this. 2 municipalities have also already had a tri-council meeting in Port Colborne and Wainfleet. So what we're doing here in the West, I think, is just being anticipatory, which I would suspect and I would suggest is what you want from us. So a little bit of background maybe on shared services, not a new topic for our council. Members of council have directed me through a motion specifically to continue to explore shared services. We've had some successes. With Grimsby specifically, we've had a shared planning service for a number of months, albeit temporary, which I think was beneficial, which yielded some positive results. Shared fire services, in terms of a pilot project, has been going on now for almost 2 years, and ultimately we'll have a decision on that. The permanency of the joint union library service between Pelham and ourselves is also something that we've had in place and continues to work, and I would suggest work very well. Similarly, emergency management, a conversation that we've had for a number of years, and that a number of municipalities share in. West Lincoln, Grimsby, ourselves. We also do a little bit of training on the emergency management part with Pelham and Wainfleet. I think as we move forward, council, as part of the budget process in the past, has directed me to look at things like climate change and determine is there possibilities for that. You know, I can tell you Pelham and West Lincoln have both come to the table expressing interest in doing that. Pelham has already agreed and sent forward an agreement on that. I think West Lincoln, it'll be something that is discussed around the West Lincoln Council. But I think it's a demonstration, and I hope council sees it, or sees it for what it is and the positives in it, that it's a demonstration that we continue to work together. Are there other things we've often talked about? We've talked about a lot of the back of house services, which really is those administrative services. Should we be doing more work together as it relates to human resources, IT, and a number of other things? And I would suggest a lot of those conversations are happening, continue to happen, and we're going to explore those options. As I mentioned, the CAOs continue to meet. We continue to have conversations and deliberations. We've looked at a whole slew of projects that are highlighted in your report. Everything from procurement, coordinated financial management software, further mergers around libraries and library services, as well as what do we do around municipal elections and the various legislative services that are provided across the region. I think this will be something that continues. It's going to be something that we continue to bring opportunities forward to our council for you to consider. We do it under the guise and the opportunities around finding efficiencies. I think oftentimes we're challenged with, can we save money in doing it? That's ultimately always our goal. But sometimes I think it's looking at future avoidance, cost avoidance, avoiding potential increases, and with changing legislation and a further demand on us to do more work, can we find ways to do that work jointly? So the shared services will continue. About 4 weeks ago now, the region brought a report forward, and as a result of that report, I think once again, as Tim said, this becomes and is very topical here in Niagara and outside of Niagara. This is an innovative way of looking at delivering services, and as I said, we should be doing this, and we'll continue to do it. We do need to be nimble enough and agile enough that when the province does come and does seek public input, and we start hearing input from other municipalities in terms of their desires across all of Niagara, that here in the West, we do have a position, and hopefully that position amongst the 3 West Niagara municipalities is aligned. So, no, I was just going to say, so those are probably the end of my formal comments, Mayor, and we'll absolutely here to take any questions you may have on any of the initiatives or any of the programs.
Councillors, with your agreement, what I would like to entertain questions to the CAO at the moment. If you have questions on the items that are included in Mr. Dobby's report, then we can go to that list. I'm not at this time entertaining the idea of having the entire list reviewed, and the reason that I'm not doing that is because there are many things in this document that refer to staff that work in all of our municipalities. So I don't want to put emphasis on individual people. Council made the decision to have this a public meeting, and I certainly applaud that. We all voted in favor of that. But there's no reason why you can't ask questions, and I know that individually you will be very sensitive in the way that's done. So I think that puts some control in our hands in terms of how that information is presented. So let's begin with CAO Kirkopoulos, and the first speaker is Councillor Reimer. Go ahead, Councillor.
Thank you, Mayor Easton. Through to our CAO, looking for your input or your view on the comments from Mr. Dobie with regards to the fact that the province has opened up, a comment period or our committee to receive comments on this. Is this a political move, or is this something that is because it seems to be less visible than the last time? Is this for real? Just looking for your comments on that.
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor. I think it's, councillor, to your comment around is it less visible or it appears to be less visible. I think right now it's a different process. It's less visible right here in our own community right now until those dates are selected and the two communities that are going to host meetings are selected. I do think there is still an immense amount of engagement that happens. I see it on social media. I see it through other forms of media, more conventional media, where people continue to talk about the importance of finding efficiencies. I hear everything from a multi-city model to one Niagara to a whole bunch of things in between. So I think while right now it's not something we're hearing about, definitely not as much from the provincial government, it is something that is still on people's minds. Organizations like the GNCC have released official positions, and I know when the standing committee process was announced and the meetings that were to take place in Barrie were announced, there were thoughts that, is that going to be the only set of meetings, and should we be having people from Niagara driving there to make delegations? We confirmed with the provincial government that there are actually going to be meetings in every community, and so I think a lot of people decided to hold off till January, February, when we anticipate those meetings are going to be held. So I think that the challenge with any sort of governance decision and what's being experienced by, my municipal colleagues in Peel is that the longer you take to make a decision, the transition then ultimately takes longer. And in order, if we're working on 4-year cycles that we're already almost 2 years into, it becomes very hard to do all the necessary work in terms of a transition board, in terms of whatever services you amalgamate or don't amalgamate, what does governance look like, and all the various elements of going forward. So do I think within this term, a decision potentially gets made? Possibly. Do I think implementation then becomes much longer and risks political change at a provincial level where maybe this doesn't become as much of a priority? That doesn't mean we shouldn't be working on shared services and continuing to find ways to collaborate. I do agree with the sentiments out there. Do you need as many leads delivering certain programs, or can we find ways to do that together? I think there's absolutely ways to look at efficiencies.
And a follow-up to that, if I may, Mayor, just, and you hit on it, Mike, my next, going to that, going through this, taking it, as three municipalities and the political climate over here, and we move together and want to move towards the goal of amalgamation, and we reach that point. Is there something that the province can or will throw in the way once we get to that point, or is the will of three municipalities enough to make that occur, irregardless of the political party or whoever's in power in the province?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor, I'd have to review the act in a little bit more detail to give you a firm or a very specific answer on that, councillor. But if three municipalities wanted to come together either in a part way or in a partial way or in a full way, nothing stops them from doing that. I would suggest, I've never seen it, where it happens almost, in a way that we say, yes, we want to do it in advance of anyone forcing us to do it. But there is definitely provisions within the act that would allow us to do that either in part or in whole. It's just a matter of, is there a will to do that, and what are all the implications of doing that? And I think what our tri-council meeting showed is there's a lot of collaboration, there's a lot of general consensus on things. When we start getting into the machinations of representation and maintaining identity and those things that I think are very core to people, sometimes that's a little bit of a longer conversation and one that is much more iterative than simply looking at two services and can those services come together.
Thank you, Ms. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor. And we'll move on now to Councillor Mikulik, please. Go ahead, Councillor.
Thank you very much, Mary Easton, through you to Mr. Kirkopoulos. So unfortunately, I wasn't able to attend this meeting. I had prior engagement. I'm all for sharing services. I'm all for sharing resources. I'm all for working with each other to save the taxpayer money. That's why we're here. That's, to spend our taxpayers' money as efficiently and the best as possible. The question I have with regards to this meeting, and it's more about process, and you mentioned earlier about, council directed you to seek out or, find ways for sharing services. But how did this meeting occur? Should council have directed you to organize or plan this meeting? I'm curious, where's council's role in directing you to organize a meeting amongst two other municipalities? Or should we have had a role?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor. Councillor, I think the best way probably for me to answer that is to take you, or to take all of council back to how the meeting came together. And, I think it was probably, a little more simple than maybe what you're describing, in that the three CAOs and the three mayors were meeting on a couple of issues, West Gibb Memorial Hospital, a few other items, and a conversation ensued around, is it best for us to be meeting together? Is it best for us to be meeting separately? And I think there was a notion thrown out, not one that we sought approval from full council in any form, and I think in any formalized way. It was really a matter of having a conversation between the three mayors, the three CAOs, and saying, maybe this is something we'd want to explore moving forward. And so, in retrospect, should we have come to council and sought permission? I mean, I think these are always learnings. When things go really well, everybody looks at it and says this was a success. Sometimes when there's some hiccups, we often look back and we say, well, maybe we should have come, maybe we should have engaged a little more, sought specific direction. But I think there's numerous occasions where either the mayor or the CAO are able to call council, are able to pull meetings together of members of council, and I think, looking back, this was done with the best of intent.
For you, and I'm certain of that. I just wonder, I would have loved to have gone. Me personally, I would have loved to have gone. I'm sure I would have had plenty to say at any of those tables. However, I just feel as though if there might be members of a council, one of the three, that would have said, nah, you know what, not interested. I don't even want to waste my time, we should be voting on whether or not we even consider that. That's where I'm kind of coming with that question. So, and if I may, just one more question around that. Through you, Mayor, why are we not all meeting together again following that first meeting? There was that first meeting. Why are we not following it up with a second meeting, but instead are meeting as three separate councils, one on Monday, one on Tuesday, and one on Wednesday? Why are we not doing that?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor. Councillor, I go back to your first question around, the complexities of bringing three councils together and how you have meetings like that. And I think when we were looking at what were the next steps following that first meeting, the complexities of how do you host, from a procedural perspective, three meetings within a meeting became, I think, complex. And we decided, can you move items forward? Can you have the necessary iterative conversations around tables if, again, we're bringing a large room of people together? So, some of this, I think, that, you live, you learn, you determine what is the best way to engage with your own council and council amongst themselves. And so we've tried it this way. There is an ongoing investigation as well from the Ombudsman that is looking at various elements of what's closed, what's not closed. We'll have to see where that goes and what comes of it. So I think, based on conversations and looking at how to decrease the complexity of how meetings are held, we thought this was a better format.
Okay, fair enough. No, I was quite impressed that with 2 weeks' notice, we were able to gather all but three councillors. I thought was pretty impressive, so thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Before we continue on to Councillor Timmers, CAO, would you please update us on the meeting that took place prior to the meeting where council was informed that there was a plan to have a meeting and there was some discussion in each of the municipalities at that time.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I mean, I think your summary is probably fairly accurate in that when we were talking about what does the format of this meeting look like, each of the respective municipalities, I think, and I wouldn't say we got to the decision quickly. We definitely had a lot of conversation on, do we have another tri-council meeting? Do we not have a tri-council meeting? Do we do it separately? Do we not? And I know in conversations with Mr. Dobby and his team, those were some of the conversations we had. If we decide to do it on our own, what does that look like? If we don't, what does that look like? I know we engaged with the mayors again on having this conversation, both separately and collectively. And I know I communicated to our council that we would be having this format of a meeting in terms of how we would be moving forward. So again, I think your summary, Madam Mayor, is fairly accurate in terms of how it came about and the decision-making that went into us moving forward this way.
Mr. CAO, I'm talking about a conversation that took place prior to the tri-council meeting. Is that the same conversation that you're referring to?
No, through you, Madam Mayor, in terms of that meeting, again, I think the format was fairly similar in that the three CAOs had conversations, met with Mr. Dobby and his team. We were looking at the various processes that we would have to undergo in order to have a meeting like that, everything from the logistics of finding space to how those meetings would function, to who would clerk it, to who would be the lead municipality in some ways, in terms of location, which mayor would open it up, which clerk would clerk it, and I think a lot of the logistics that went into it. We did communicate at that time. I think scheduling, to Councillor Mikulic's point, was one of those things that's often tough. How do you have it? How quickly do you have it? What date do you pick? And you hope as many people as possible can come. And I think we were lucky in getting all but three, I think, as the councillor highlighted. So the conversations have been fairly open and iterative, and I know I've been trying to share with our council as much as possible that information, those meetings, and how the decisions ensued following that.
Yeah, certainly not unique within the region. There are other people that have been having similar meetings without the same level of scrutiny, that's for sure. Councillor Timmers, please.
Thank you very much, Mayor Easton. So, just a couple of comments around how the tri-council meeting came about. I certainly appreciate the leadership that the CAOs of all three municipalities and the mayors took in this. This is a big thing that's coming on us, and we're going to have to meet. If we want to talk about amalgamating, we have to be at the table together, and we're going to have these meetings. So I think it was great, and I think it was well-attended, and it shows true leadership, in my opinion. My other question, you've kind of touched on it a bit, is just, so, this is huge, which we're taking on here. And as I just said, we're going to have more meetings. So any kind of timelines, like what's your thoughts on moving forward? Like what are our next steps? You did speak to it a little bit, but did you have anything more on that? Like what do we do next?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor, I mean, a little bit of what do you do next, I think, is in your hands, Councillor Timmers. But I would suspect timelines, we're looking at January, February before meetings are held here in Niagara. And I think you're going to see a number of people, because this topic is one that a number of people are engaged on, I think present at the standing committee. And I think you're overwhelmingly likely to hear from them that some changes need to be made. How minor or how major, that I can't tell you. I think you're probably going to hear both ends of the spectrum. Some minor changes, maybe some more major changes. I would say I think we just need to be ready to respond to those changes. What I would never want council to be is flat-footed. Some comments get made, you're then forced to either respond to them publicly or otherwise, and you haven't had the conversations either amongst ourselves or even in a broader group. I think we need to wait for the ombudsman complaint process to end and to be completed so we can determine the various elements of what we're comfortable talking about and not talking about. I think there's general agreement. The more we can say in public, the better. We shouldn't be getting into how many CAOs are needed or how many roles are needed in a particular area. I think we should be talking general principles. I think we should be talking about why we want to come together, the benefits of it, the potential efficiencies, but never necessarily at this particular point in time get into the specifics of A position or B position. And I think inevitably, though, when we start having conversations around merging services or amalgamating services, that's initially where people first go. We probably saw a little bit of that in our tri-council meeting in terms of salaries and this and that. And so I think legitimately, is there things that at a certain point in a process you should be discussing in camera? Absolutely. But I do think that is far too, like, where we're at right now is not those types of conversations. We need to talk about what is the best structure. How do we deal with representation? How do we maintain character and what our communities stand for? Not necessarily, okay, so how many CAOs are we going to have? If a municipality was to merge with another municipality. That is not the time, and now is not the time to have those types of conversations. So I think some of it's a wait and see approach, but, my advice to you is always, let us be ready to respond when asked.
Thank you for that. And Mary, send one other question. So when the province announced that it would appoint facilitators and a committee to, best assess the roles and responsibilities, what's that facilitator committee structure look like? And who would, what kinds of people would be sitting on that committee? I don't know if you can answer that, but that's one of my questions that I have.
And we may have, if Mr. CAO doesn't have the information, we'll have Mr. Dobby come up.
Thank you.
He's probably had some experience in this area. Go ahead, CAO.
Through you, Madam Mayor. So maybe just to clarify, Councillor, the initial process was a facilitator-type process where they would announce a facilitator, and I think we were all waiting with bated breath to see who the facilitator would be, because we kept hearing it would be announced. They've gone away from that approach, and that was similar to approach that was announced in 2018, where then former CAO and Deputy Minister and Public Servant Michael Fenn and Ken Sealing, former chair in Waterloo Region, were the two facilitators who went around, met with mayors and CAOs, and then gathered information, pulled a report together, and made a recommendation that didn't go anywhere. This process is now very different. They've changed the process from a facilitator who will go out and meet with people to actually having a standing committee of MPPs that sit on the particular committee that's going to be hearing this. I do have a list of those MPPs that I can share with members of council off the top of my head. I can't remember who they are, but I think it's 5 or 6 MPPs. None from the areas that are actually subject to this process that we're currently talking about. That are going to meet in the various communities. It'll be the same members of the committee in each committee, and they will take a process similar to what they do around budget consultation. So some members of council may have been to various budget consultations that are held with various standing committees of the province, where they come, they listen, you make a presentation, they take that information down and they use it to make a decision. That really will be the model. But Tim may know who exactly, I could probably look up who's on the committee. I just don't have my phone or anything in front of me to actually look that up for you, but we can definitely get it for members of council.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mary Easton.
Well, certainly the important part of that is the fact that the important part of it is, as you were clarifying, there's a change in terms of having the facilitator, and that change was made, I believe, within days of us having our tri-council meeting. I have Councillor Brunet. Go ahead, Councillor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, through you to the CAO. So, Mike, thanks for the presentation. Thanks for the opportunity to have Mr. Dobby and Lori-Ann here this evening for the update on what's happening around the province. Mike, you mentioned something there earlier that you think that the more we can say publicly, the better things are. So with that as front of mind, I guess my question would be, we had the Tri-County meeting, and then we had someone file something to the ombudsman. So where would we be right now? What would we be doing had the ombudsman not be involved, in your opinion?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor. We started off, Councillor, to your question, I think specifically, we started that meeting off with a very small public piece to it, and then we immediately went in camera for education. I still think there are absolutely legitimate reasons that council should be in camera to get educated on particular topics. I think, though, once that education occurs and we start talking about topics that impact neighborhoods, communities, people's, again, representation, all the things we've talked about, we should be public. Can I tell you specifically, I'd like to be able to tell you 100% that we would be in public right now. I think sometimes things happen that force us to reflect, and I probably, if I'm being completely honest, would say that's where we're at right now. We were forced to reflect a little bit more and say, okay, how do we structure the meeting a lot more specifically so that we can keep more in public than in camera? If you said to me right now, though, Mike, I want to talk to you a little bit about cost savings around staffing, we would tell you that, to save that, and towards the end of the meeting, we would officially go in camera, we would go through that process, and then we could have those types of conversations. So I think, again, I look forward to, the ombudsman complaint process playing out so that I can better understand what's education, it's not education, and that fine line between, when you're getting educated on a topic that may not necessarily be a topic that would take you in camera, but it's still education, where the legislation falls on that. But I think it's a good question, Councillor, and could I tell you 100% we'd be in public if we didn't have that happen to us? Probably not. I couldn't tell you that 100%. I'd like to think that, as we have conversations and go through these experiences, it leads us to, a better outcome.
So, Madam Mayor, if I could just follow up.
Yes, go ahead.
So I really appreciate that response. I appreciate your frankness. I asked the question, and my next question is simply, so the ombudsman process, how long do you anticipate this was going to be? Because I firmly believe that if we feel at the core of this, we've done nothing wrong, and I don't want the clerk ducking underneath the table like, because I'm saying something, not for, slap me on the wrist, but if we feel at the core that we've done nothing wrong, how long is this process going to be where the ombudsman come back and report, and like, from your experience, or maybe Mr. Dobby?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor. I anticipate this is it's not a complex issue that they're dealing with. A lot of the interviews have already happened. So I suspect in fairly short order, we should hear something. But again, notwithstanding, I think what may be a little bit of a distraction with that, if we stay to the core principle that we want to keep as much of this conversation public, then we should be in a good position.
Thank you. So, Madam Mayor, just one final question, my third question. So, Mike, this is all great, and, we're talking about governance, we're talking about, possible amalgamation, shared services. These are all wonderful things that I think we should be looking at. But in the meantime, it's business as usual. We're still operating as a lower tier government, upper tier region of Niagara. We're going into budget. We have regional councilors that we are being told in emails this week that we need to come up with priorities, to bring to the region during budget time. So again, I'm not trying to pry, but there was a decision made that the regional councilors, and I firmly supported that decision at the time, that those regional councilors would not be participating in that first tri-meeting. And maybe this is an unfair question, but I'm going to ask it. What is the thought process moving forward as the involvement of regional councilors in this process? Because they are, three people in West Niagara that we depend along with our mayors, to make decisions to move our current business along. So I felt I needed to ask that question.
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor. And I think it's a good question, councillor. I can tell you I spoke with Councillor Foster earlier. I told him this meeting's going to be open. He has another event at the NPCA, so he's going to try to get here as soon as possible. I do know at the other two municipalities, Councillor Witteveen and Councillor Seaborn were at their particular meetings, I believe. I know definitely Councillor Witteveen, but I also think Councillor Seaborn was at the Grimsby meeting. I think where we can, we should be involving our regional councillors in terms of that advocacy and what things look like. I think in that first meeting, because we were in camera, and typically regional councillors don't find themselves in camera during what are LAM, local municipal meetings, we determined, I think, from a procedural standpoint, that wouldn't be the way we would go forward. But again, I think moving forward, because most of these are going to be public, there's absolutely every opportunity for regional councillors to be involved. Again, I think if our council decided to veer off into an area that took us in camera around staffing or something like that, we'd probably have to make a decision. And in that particular case, I don't think the regional councillor would be involved in that, no different than any of you sitting around that table. Even if there's some joint initiatives that we do with the region, we're not privy to some of their in-camera conversations. So, but I can tell you, I think moving forward, we're going to continue to ensure that regional councillors are invited to these meetings.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor. And Councillor Russell, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. To the CAO, I keep going back and thinking about our position and whether or not we would be entertaining any of this discussion if the government had not brought this up. And my contention would probably be no. Other than shared services, that aside. Amalgamation, I'm speaking of. With all respect to Mr. Dobby, I don't believe that another region starting some activity means that this is moving forward or is more of a priority than what was under the old plan. I think, in fact, the opposite. I think, again, moving with what the government's done to themselves, I think, again, there's a lot more pressure on them and probably a lot less emphasis on this. And I think even moving to the committee format that they're doing is actually a step back for what their original plan was. So with that being said, I'm concerned about moving an agenda forward where there may not be a need and where it may not necessarily put us in a good position. And I think this was stressed by some at that tri-party meeting, that us advocating that this is a good idea doesn't necessarily put us in a good negotiation position. So again, I don't think it's something that we should do, and it's not something I would support. I also think, again, just given to Councillor Bernet's point, again, it is still status quo. We have a lot of things to do. I don't think this is necessarily a stressor that our staff or any of the other staffs from some of the other municipalities need to adhere to or need to have on top of what their normal day-to-day is. So again, I think, and I've got a motion, I'm going to send it to the clerk, that the Town of Lincoln cease all discussions and consultations supporting amalgamation until we are publicly directed to pursue by the provincial government, and that the Town of Lincoln continue to seek out shared service agreements only if they provide economic benefits to the community.
Okay, that's fine, just hold that in advance. Okay. Is there anybody else that, we don't have anybody, Councillor Njima?
Can you say that again, Madam Mayor? Your mic wasn't on.
Just hold the motion in advance, Councillor. Councillor Njima, do you have any comments? Nothing? Okay. I have a couple of comments, Mr. CAO, but my question is really to Mr. Dobby.
You can talk to the motion.
Because it relates to what Councillor Russell just said.
And through you, Madam Mayor, if I could, after your question to Mr. Dobby, maybe some comments to Councillor Russell.
Do you want to make those now? Okay, Mr. Dobby, my question to you is, in preparation for the meeting with the provincial representatives, do you have any advice, and I don't know whether you've been asked this question before or not, but do you have any advice to this council in regard to how we should be proceeding. And the reason I'm asking this question is because in the last go-around, where there was a facilitator, the government did not invite or provide any opportunity for either regional councilors or local councils to have input. The only people that were invited to those meetings were the mayor and the CAO. And so you try to include as much in the dialogue as you can, which you can glean from people. However, now we have a different format. People are pivoting in place almost. So how do we, because I know that other communities in Niagara have moved way ahead on this. They're not doing it publicly, but they are moving way ahead. And certainly the movement on One Niagara is quite substantial. So how do we protect our interests? I understand where the councillors are coming from. How do we protect our interests? How do we ensure that a population of 100,000 won't be on the back foot when this committee comes forward to meet with us?
So, Madam Mayor, to you, so the change from there being a facilitator to not, and then having a committee, that's new. So, but I can tell you my experience with facilitators and how that system works. So, in the 1990s, with the amalgamations of Ottawa, Toronto, and Hamilton, there were facilitators involved in each of those. And for those local municipalities who did not put something forward to the province, and your point that you made that the facilitator normally came to the mayors and the CAOs and not a lot more, but you still could make, the mayors and the CAOs could put forward a proposal for their own municipality as an option. All I know is that about halfway through that process, there was an announcement from the province that it was going to be one city in Toronto, one city in Ottawa, and one city in Hamilton. And the council members, or the councils who were at local communities, and I'll just use Hamilton as an example, like Dundas and Ancaster and Stony Creek, they did not put anything forward, and they wish they had. Now, would it have made any difference? I have no idea. I do know, however, that I was a bit surprised by the announcement of what's happened at Peel Region. At Peel Region, it seems as though that's the exact change from what happened in the 1990s with those three cities. And so and the councillor raised the point that he thought the change from a facilitator to a committee is a backward step or going to give us less opportunity. I respect that, and I don't know for sure. I kind of think this might be it might be open for more people to give options to that group. And so my only suggestion is if there's going to be change, then if you've got an option you want considered, you've got to make it before the province decides what they're going to do. And in the past, and I'm not saying that I know when they would do it or if they would do it, but in the past, they have brought those facilitators that got the reports. In the 1900s, they moved on all three of them. In 2018, they decided not. So this is not a science. It is very much a very difficult issue for everybody to deal with. And that's why what I said earlier about, I think the more, if you've got some ideas, I think they need to go to this committee. I respect the fact that you are extremely busy. The times you've been through with the virus and things like that, the budget issues, and on it goes. Municipalities are just behind in what they're doing because of those past 4 years. So I do think that, I think my advice would be take the opportunity to make a presentation. we should know when the dates will occur, and that would allow us to continue on. I do think that if they had appointed facilitators on September 30th, we probably would have had another council meeting in Niagara for discussion. So, I mean, so that's kind of where I see it. It's a tough issue to deal with, for sure.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much. Now, Mr. CAO is going to make a comment, but not to the motion. Correct?
No,
Through-
motions.
Are you going to speak to the motion?
Through you, Madam Mayor, I mean, I suspect the councilor's initial comments / question / introduction of a motion are all intertwined, so my comments
Okay.
are going to be around
All right. I just want to.
that particular topic, yes.
Okay. Counselor Russell, I want to make sure that does the clerk have your motion now? Okay. Could we have the motion up on the board?
Yes. But I think that
So,
before we
Madam
do
Mayor,
that,
if I could have your indulgence to make a few comments, please, on the motion.
I'm trying to facilitate that. Just a moment. Madam Clerk, would you put
Yeah, I'll count.
okay.
Are you able to see it? Is it now? If I give you the document, if I give it to you in Word, can you throw it up on the screen? Yes. Yeah, okay. It's coming your way.
Madam Mayor, I'd like to call a point of order.
Go ahead.
Shoot, her mic's not on. And
Just a moment.
so just
Counselor Mikulik, can you, and Counselor Reimer, would you come off, please? Thank you. Counselor Timmers.
I'm not really sure what we're doing with this motion, because this is a motion that was not on the agenda. There's no notice of motion. So are we now going to be discussing this motion?
Well, we're going to facilitate the presentation of this motion. That is what I'm in the process of doing.
Should there not be a vote to even put this motion on the
There
table?
will be.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. However, thank you very much for
Thank
your
you, Mayor.
comments.
Madam Mayor, just give me one moment. We're going to put the motion on the screen, and the CAO can provide his comments.
Okay? Counselors, one of the things that I'm trying to accomplish here is to avoid having a motion truncate the discussion. So it's maybe a little bit messy. We're trying to facilitate the motion, also continue on with the discussion if we possibly can. So if I could just have your indulgence. Okay, Madam Clerk, would you please read the motion? I can't see it.
Yes. That the town of Lincoln cease all discussions and consultations supporting amalgamation until we are publicly directed to pursue it by the provincial government, and that the town of Lincoln continue to seek out shared service agreements only if they provide economic benefits to our community, and this has been put on the floor by Councillor Russell.
Okay, Madam Clerk, would you please call out a vote or take a vote to confirm the motion that's being presented?
So this is just to add to the floor. So Councillor Russell has added this. I'll need a seconder, please, to put it actually on the floor. This isn't to approve the motion. This is just to consider the motion.
Do we have a seconder?
Councillor Brunet? And can I have a show of hands, please, that you agree to have this motion on the floor? and that carries. Thank you.
Okay, my apologies, Mr. CAO, please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So just some comments, and we can put it back up on the slide so everyone can see it again. But Councilor, I totally in agreement with the second part of it. I think the challenge with the first part, again, I'll go back to one of the comments I made in my opening comments. I don't want council to be hamstrung when a date is announced and we're told, or we express interest in speaking, which I think we should. Every other municipality will likely be speaking at this standing committee. So, I'm okay if you want to include something, and again, it's in council's hands, that says that at this point in time, the town of Lincoln does not support amalgamation, but I wouldn't want you to be hamstrung. And I don't know if I'll have the time to be able to come back to you, for instance, at a particular meeting and say, we're going to go speak at the standing committee, where ultimately the topic of some sort of amalgamation may come up. So I think if you're open to changing some of the wording here, but to suggest that we cease all discussions. I understand the sentiment as well around not spending time and energy on something that may not happen, and I completely agree with that. And I think from a staff perspective, that's something that we all support. I just don't want council, and by extension, the CAO, or any of us that are asked to come speak to this particular topic, to be hamstrung and us not to have time in front of you, where then we can have another discussion, and then you can direct us in a different way to do it. So in your hands, open to answering any questions you may have on it. That's the only part of that first one. The seesaw discussions until directed to pursue it. I mean, I think at the end of the day, we're not going to pursue it, and I can tell you the conversations that it's 3 municipalities we're having now amongst the CAOs, we're not talking about full amalgamation, where those aren't the conversations we're having. But again, as long as this doesn't hamstring me from being able to present or be part of a presentation in front of a standing committee, then I'd be okay with it, but I'd want that very clearly understood amongst members of council.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. CEO. Councillor Reimer, could I ask you to stand down for a moment? I'm going to ask Councillor Russell to speak to his motion, and then we'll be next on the list. Go ahead, Councillor Russell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you to the CEO. Again, I agree. I think that, again, if there is a request to be a delegate to present, to me, that we're presenting that we're not necessarily in favor of amalgamation. Presenting on the things that we're doing for shared services, the opportunities we have as outlined in the report, I think that is very, very prudent. I just don't think that we should be going forward and saying that this is what we want to do and we are in favor of it. But again, that's up to council.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Reimer, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Easton. Speaking directly to the motion, last year we, as council, passed a motion to advise staff or to encourage staff to seek out shared services. And for myself, when I put my hand up for that, this is the next step of shared services. We just don't go to and share a few services and then say that's enough and not move towards amalgamation. So in my mind, at least, when we put my hand up for that, this is the next logical step is amalgamation. And to support this motion would fly in the face of this council. My experience with it in the last 4 or 5 years has been to sometimes seek excruciating amount of information on a certain topic. And just to shut this discussion down, I think would be a huge mistake. These are very high-level discussions. We're not, as the CEO has given us some examples of some more detailed stuff, we're not even there yet. And waiting for the province, I think, to advise us on something or make us do something would be a huge mistake. We'd be playing catch-up and we'd be way behind, and I don't think we need to miss out. I would not want us to miss out an opportunity to present to this committee, and I would be in full support of moving our discussions forward. There's no red flags yet. There's no penalties. There's no big black clouds in this. There might be, and maybe within next quarter or the middle of next year, we say this isn't happening. This is ridiculous. But right now, I don't see anything positive about ending these discussions. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor. And Councillor Timmers?
Thank you very much, Mayor Easton. I am speaking to the motion as well. I will not, absolutely not support this motion. I think it's short-sighted. I think it's without too much thought actually behind it. This council is not ready to say yes or no to amalgamation. We don't even have all the information. We need to work forward. We have to go forward, have a voice, and get in the game. If we're not in the game with a voice and speak for our town, we don't know where it might go. And I would hate to think that we're going to have to hear, the province has, ruled that this is how it's going to go. We need to make it clear and have our tri-council meetings and discuss this amongst everyone and make it clear what our stand is. And I think this motion is just absolutely a very, very bad decision, and I will not support it.
Thank you very much, Councillor. We'll move on now to Councillor Mikulik. Go ahead, Councillor.
Thank you very much, Mayor Easton. Typically, me and Councillor Russell are very, very similar-minded, but I'm struggling with this one. I consider it, what we're up to be very much like dating, the neighboring municipalities. I don't know if I want to break up. I don't know if I want to just cancel that at this time. I think we should always keep a dialogue. Doesn't have to be a commitment. Anything that is decided or anything that is considered has to be brought back to us for consideration, and we have the ability to say yes or no. So at this time, I still like playing the dating game. So that's my comment.
Thank you very much, Mr. CAO. Did you have a response to that?
Through you, Madam Mayor, not specifically to the dating game, but yeah, so understanding the general
Well, now
intent.
that you've done the headline for the newspaper tomorrow.
Yeah, I didn't have, that's not my headline, I won't take credit. I think understanding the general intent that you don't want me, or any of us, engaging in formal negotiations around amalgamation until directed to, I think that's generally understood. So if the motion was something a little more specific, like that, such as the town of Lincoln not engage in formal negotiations until directed to, but I can't promise you, with all, I think honesty, integrity, that the word amalgamation never comes up in any conversations the CAOs have. And so if it does, am I then contravening council's direction? And I wouldn't want to, from an integrity standpoint, from an honesty standpoint, put myself in that situation where either I have to recuse myself because I've been directed by council never to discuss it. So I think, council, if the general intent to get out there is that you don't want us formally negotiating till we're directed to, absolutely, I would agree with that. You just need to give me some flexibility where I can still be able to talk about it, even at a very high level, even in a very hypothetical level, because it inevitably comes up in every shared services conversation, even if it doesn't amount to anything. And so those would be my comments, but definitely willing to answer any other comments or questions council has.
Thank you very much, CAO. Go ahead, Councillor Brunei.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm not sure how I follow up my colleague to my right. I'm happily married. I'm hoping my dating are in the rearview mirror. But with all seriousness, I'm wondering if Councillor Russell is. I appreciate the fact that he brought this motion up, respectful of staff's time. I'm just. When you talk about timing, I'm just wondering if this is the wrong time to be throwing a motion like this up when, it's like the optics are such that we're pulling the chute because of other things that are happening. And I don't think we have anything to hide here. We've done nothing wrong. Ombudsman investigation or whatever. And if we feel that we're doing the right thing here, looking at all these things, I'm respectful of Councillor Russell's comments about respecting staff's time, but I think it's prudent to continue to move forward. So I probably, as the motion stands, will not be supporting it. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor. And Council, any comments, Mr. CAO?
Through you, Madam Mayor, no, not at this time. as I said, I understand the general intent, and so as long as council gives me some flexibility and maybe amends some of the wording, then
All right, well, I think there's some amendments coming, councillors.
Councilor Regima.
Councillor Njima, go ahead, please. You're on mute at the moment.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm not sure, I'll wait and see what the amendment looks like, but I wanted to comment about the second part of the motion. I'm in agreement that I don't think today is necessarily a time for a motion to go in another direction. We're kind of really still in the process of discussing and deciding where we're going. So that's what I saw this meeting today as. I don't feel ready to honestly support any kind of motion that drops a hammer at this point. I'd like to leave the flexibility with the CAO to move forward with discussions. But I just wanted to comment on the second part of the motion about shared services having strictly an economic benefit. I think we've heard over time from various sources that shared services have benefits beyond just strictly economic. And not only that, but it's also very hard to measure. How would we hold ourselves to that, and how would we determine whether a proposed shared service has a strictly economic benefit? So I'm a little concerned about the word economic in there, but I'll wait and see what the amended motion looks like.
Thank you very much, councillor.
Thank you.
Councillor Timmers?
Thank you, Mary Stina. I just have a couple more comments. You know, I agree with Councilor Regima. I don't think now is the time to put the hammer down. We've just started. We've barely put our toe in the water here, and now we're coming out with this motion. We're not going to talk, we're going to end all discussions. I don't think we're ready to make a decision like that. We don't even have the information in front of us. And as far as the shared services, this council has already been very clear with direction to staff to investigate shared services. We're already doing that. So I feel I can't support any part of this motion, any amendments, or any piece of it. So that's I'll be voting no to the whole thing. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. CAO? You
through
have your
your,
light on, so I'm just making sure that
I think I've
I'm
just
not
left it on.
excluding you.
through you, Madam Mayor, I've just left it on, but so I look at the word economic, and I probably know how the councillor meant it, but I know I interpret it both as qualitative and quantitative economic benefits, and I think, there's elements of both that I would include back in any report with you that spoke to the economic benefits or otherwise. And so I think typically we look at economic benefits and we think dollars, cents, money. There's other economic benefits that go to the well-being of staff, cost avoidance, and a whole bunch of other things that I would include in there. So that would be my interpretation for the record.
Thank you very much, Mr. CAO. Madam Clerk, do we have an amendment?
We do. In light of the discussion, Councillor Russell has decided to amend his motion, and I'll read that out, if
Is
that's
it
okay.
set on the board?
We're just going to put
The
that on the
screen?
board. In the meantime, Madam Mayor, I will read it out. That the town of Lincoln does not engage in formal amalgamation negotiations until we are publicly directed to pursue, and that the town of Lincoln continue to seek out shared service agreements only if they provide economic benefits to the community.
Okay. Comments to the amendments only. Councillor Murray.
Thank you very much, Mayor Easton, through you. I'm not quite sure, has there been any discussion of negotiations? I didn't realize we had reached that point. My understanding was that we were exploring what it might look like, and if so, what we might want to present as options from our perspective as to what might make sense for our community. So I'm not sure why we're talking now about formal amalgamation, because I didn't think it was on the table. So if I could just get a little clarity on that, please.
Mr. CAO.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I wouldn't say it's formally on the table, but I wouldn't say it's formally off the table. Nothing's really on the table other than part of looking at governance that includes either amalgamation in part or in whole. And so there is nothing that we've, to your point, I think your initial comment that this is probably 3 or 4 steps ahead of where we're at right now. We're not having any sort of formal conversations, and our conversations right now continue to focus on shared services. However, I think in short order, when that subcommittee or that standing committee appears here in Niagara, conversations will be thrown out there, not in a formal way, but definitely by stakeholders around amalgamation. But you're right, it's still a few steps ahead.
Go ahead, Councillor.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor, through you to the CAO. So then, just to speak to that, the motion does say no formal negotiations, and yet I'm hearing you say that even if we're having discussions and we're at the standing committee doing a presentation, there still is no formal negotiation. So it feels as if we're not going to do formal negotiations until we've been told you're going to have to amalgamate. So I feel like this is kind of presenting a motion for something that can't happen. We can't enter formal negotiations until we're directed by we can't, well, at least perhaps I'm wrong on that. Perhaps we could, but my understanding was we can't enter those kind of negotiations until the province says, we want you to amalgamate. So that's I think where I'm stuck, is that I feel like we're putting forward a motion for something that already exists, but please do correct me.
Through you, Madam Mayor. I think one of the earlier comments I made to that question, Councillor, was that there's nothing that precludes us from entering into more formalized conversations to change how we govern our municipalities. Yes, the province can do it with a swipe of a pen. We saw that in Toronto, a decision by the Premier, and half a council gets cut in size. We saw that in Peel in terms of the dissolution of Peel Region. It can happen fairly quickly, but similarly, can municipalities come together if they choose to come together and enter into negotiations and then ask the province on a proactive basis? I haven't seen it. There's probably a few cases up in Northern Ontario, and Tim probably knows them better, where some municipalities have done that. But I would say I think it's very rare that we do that proactively. But under the Act, is it possible? Yeah, it's possible.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Russell, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. So just to speak to a little further, again, the original intent of the motion was that we're not advocating to amalgamate in our position. And again, I think that's very important. I think it's even very important for the eventual execution of an amalgamation if it were to happen, because I don't think coming to a consensus is going to happen on how the new model is going to be, if there is one, to be created. I think it does have to, and I did stress this at the meeting, it does have to be pushed down to us in order for it to ever come to fruition. And I think if we are being forthright and saying, yes, we are open to it, and yes, we as a tri-party municipality are interested in moving this forward, then I think we're really putting horses onto the cart where it may not necessarily be required.
Okay, I'm just moving on with the list. I realize that the back and forth may not quite be in the right order, but I'm going now to Councillor Reimer.
Thank you, Mayor Easton. This is to the amendment. We do have an amendment on the floor?
Yes.
Yes, so it's to the amendment. I'm fearful of any restrictions at all. I think we're making a decision on something that we're way too far ahead for. These are high-level discussions, and I'm just uncomfortable putting any restrictions on them. We're not making any decisions or putting a stamp on things, or, it's just very high level, and I'm uncomfortable with any restrictions at all, and I would just like to see the process move forward fluidly as it has been, and I don't support the amendment or the motion. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Reimer, and Councillor Mikulik, again to the amendment.
Thank you. The amendment's not on the screen right now, so it's hard to.
Could we have
it's
it
only,
on the-
No, it's all right. Like, it's just the word formal, and I feel like I'm in grade 7, but what is the definition of formal? Like, in terms of, I'm good with conversations. I'm good with high-level conversations. Formal, yeah, I'm not too in favor of formal. But I don't know, again, like, I'm trying to get clarification on what constitutes a formal negotiate or a formal discussion.
Could you clarify that, Mr. CAO?
Through you, Madam Mayor, I mean, I think, the comments I made to the original motion was just don't hamstring me as your CAO in being able to have these types of conversations in a very informal way. If the intent, as I said, is that you don't want me entering into formal negotiations, I think that is clearly understood. That requires a much more comprehensive, complex, and detailed analysis that's going to take a lot longer than a few meetings. And so I wouldn't be engaging in anything formal without council direction. My comment remains. I just don't necessarily think it's appropriate that we hamstring ourselves in any conversations. And so if the motion, and there's political rationale for the motion, I'm absolutely in your hands on that. My comment to you is, again, don't, or allow me the opportunity to at least have conversations when the topic comes up, and then come back to you for more formal conversations and formal direction.
Okay, through you. So if I was to support this motion in terms of, I'm not in favor of formal, you still have the ability to have conversations and discussions.
Through you, Madam Mayor, that's how I look at it.
Okay.
I just want that to be on the record, that's all how we're interpreting
That's
it.
how I want to be on the record if I support this motion. Thank you.
Okay.
And so I'll look at the clerk and maybe,
It's all
her
being
interpretation of it.
It's all being taken.
But I would suggest, to anyone watching, my colleagues in the other two municipalities, that any formal amalgamation negotiations not being engaged in by the town of Lincoln in no way doesn't mean, when we talk about shared services and the possible progression to more than shared services, that I'm going to disengage or recuse myself from those conversations. That is not the case.
Understood, Councillor? Okay, thank you very much. Moving on now to Councillor Russell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Back again. So a follow-up, take back a step. What would be the steps in order to actually ascertain what the formal position is of all three municipalities?
Through you, Madam Mayor, typically it would likely be a motion, I think, coming from all three municipalities. So for me, the way I would see it would likely be some sort of legislative outline process where official direction is given.
But, sorry, through you, Madam Mayor, but what would be required to get to that point?
Through you, Madam Mayor, that's a complex question, Councillor. I probably haven't, put my mind to what it would be in all three places. I think similarly, if we use this week as an example, where all three councils in consecutive nights have dealt with similar topics, albeit very different discussions, even maybe some different formats in terms of the way it was presented, it would probably take a position like that. If I fast forward to a date is given for these standing committees, I think one of the things the CAOs are going to want to know, and probably in having conversations with the mayors and council, what sort of, are we making a joint presentation? Are we making individual presentations? Is there more benefit, power, ability to influence shared services or any topic that's raised if we do it together versus doing it separately? So I think we will be in front of respective councils probably in the next number of weeks and months to have these sorts of conversations once the date's announced. I'm suggesting a couple weeks. It could be a couple of months from now that we're in front of you saying, okay, here the three CAOs have come up with a position paper of sorts or some key principles. What is it you want us to present? Because at the end of the day, for sure, I think after just watching this last week and the types of conversations we're having, we want to be very aligned in terms of what we're presenting. And are we presenting anything in those position papers on behalf of either ourselves or West Niagara that says, yes, we're in support of shared services or we're in support of something further. And so I think we're going to be in front of you and then ultimately get some direction on what you'd like us to do. Go it on our own, go it together, and then what is the subject of those conversations or positions that we take. Again, I think we've always thought it's likely some general principles. Getting into a conversation around amalgamation is far too early right now. And to your point, I think what we heard generally coming out of the Tri-Council meeting is, unless we're directed, we're not going to proactively go there. I would say that's a general summary of what I definitely heard from some. But again, I'd be in front of you saying, how do you want me to present to the standing committee in terms of a position, principles, Lincoln's feelings? And I suspect my colleagues are having similar conversations. We've talked already about likely maybe the three of us do it together. But again, the direction may be from one, two, or all three to go separate. And so I think that those are some conversations that need to evolve over the next little while.
Okay. And through you, Madam Mayor, just one last point. So in that answer, there was no mention of any discussion or reach out to our residents. How would that be facilitated, do you think?
Mr. CEO.
Through you, Madam Mayor. I mean, residents are going to have an opportunity to also delegate, should they want to delegate to that standing committee. But I think you raise a good question in that if we are going to take an official position outside of some general principles, what is that official position? And what do our residents support? I think generally, our residents support shared services. We've been talking about it for a number of years. We include it on a lot of our surveys around budget, and I think there's a general understanding. If we start to talk about things that are a little more structured than shared services, you're right. I think we do need to look at what's the associated engagement and communication strategy that goes along with that, which really there hasn't been a lot of, I think, energy or thought put towards yet.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Murray, I'm going to give you a chance to come on. Do you want to speak? You've been on a couple times, so I'm just going to give you
Thank
that
you.
last shot.
I apologize for the Christmas tree lighting all over there. I was back and forth a number of times with whether I wanted to say anything or not. And I think our CAO, Kirkopoulos, just recently spoke to what my concern was that I feel like some of your motion presupposes that we are against amalgamation, and I don't think that decision has been made. I don't think we've had a discussion around whether the municipality is in favor or not, which is why I think this is way too soon to be making a call like this. So that's really all I thought I wanted to say.
Councillor Russell, I think you're done.
No, one more. Yeah. Councillor Murray rang a note of considerations. Again, I think our CAO gave a very good response to my last question, and it did fill in a lot of the blanks. And I would agree with Councillor Murray that this probably does, it's premature. So again, I'm happy to pull it at this point in time, and I know, Madam Clerk, it was a long but fruitful discussion. And again, I think we've got lots of time, and there's going to be a whole nother evening of Popeye's chicken a week from now to discuss it again, if you like. So I'm happy to pull it.
Thank you very much. Mr. CAO, do you have anything more to say?
Through you, Madam Mayor, no, not really. I thank Council for the fruitful and, I think, informative discussion. It gave us absolutely a lot of things to think about, and so I thank you very much.
All right, I have one comment. There's, regardless of what we do or don't do, the conversations on One Niagara are going to continue. They're very active. The conversation on 3 cities or 4 cities are also very active. These things are going to dovetail, they're going to feather in, they're going to do something, but they're all out there. Somehow all of this needs to come together in a logical fashion so that as many people as possible can have input into it. We still can't negate the fact that the province could come along and say, this is the edict and this is what you're going to have. We're foolish to think that it won't happen. They may be a bit distracted right now, but eventually this is all going to come to the fore. My concern is that we not be prepared, even if it's a list that's been prioritized in terms of what are our best choices. What can we live with? What do we really want to move toward? And so I'm glad that the motion has been removed from the table because I believe that we need the opportunity to discuss these things on quite an ongoing basis now. And so now I see we have a few more speakers. I'm trying to move this along, but having no success. But it's all good. Councillor Reimer.
I'll be quick, Mayor Easton. Just a comment and then a question to the CEO. To dovetail exactly on what, Mayor Easton, what you were just discussing or bringing up, there are discussions happening and interviews and articles being written about all different types and forms of amalgamations, and I just think we need to be in the mix. But I would thank Councillor Russell for withdrawing this motion. I think I understand where his heart was in this, and I think when it gets to that point, when it gets to the public consultation, when it gets to the in-depth conversations is when, we need to have some formal, approvals and processes to go there. I mean, the public has to be part of this, that's obvious. But I think we're quite forward of that yet, and we just need to keep these high-level conversations going. You mentioned, Mr. CEO, through you, Mayor Easton, to the CEO, the key principles. So as far as next steps or continuing this moving forward, if the meeting is our goal with this or presenting to the committee, the provincial committee, and what do we need to be as a town or as 3 municipalities? Where do we need to be? What's got to be there in order not to waste this committee's time or to present well, for lack of a better term?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor. I didn't really get a chance to look, councillor, or at least not extensively, to listen, read, and understand how all the presentations occurred at the meeting that happened last week. I think they were all very different, all had different positions or approaches or styles to it. I use the word principles because I think that really is the first part of this type of conversation. If we're going to be, again, whether it be by ourselves or with others in front of a committee, I think we should be talking about principles. And if those principles are things like fairness, representation, cost conscious, go through the list of, I think, of general principles that you would want, maintaining community feel, look, and identity. Those things are all principles. They're things that came up at the Tri-Council meeting. And things that I think if we're going to go to a committee and say, we agree that maybe coming together to seek efficiencies makes sense, whether you call that amalgamation or shared services, but we think, province, if you're going to make this decision, keep at the forefront these decisions. Equal representation, maintaining identity, all those principles that we agree to, and that's an important part of it. I don't anticipate we get in more depth than that. If I'm a provincial committee, I'm looking for something high depth, not yes, pull us together, or no, leave us apart. I think it's easy to say no and yes in those particular cases, but what do you do in terms of co-creating a solution that everyone can get around? And I think, again, public consultation needs to be part of that. So if we go there and we say, we agree on some general principles, but we want to engage our communities, and if our communities think this is a good idea, then we're supportive of it. I think that's the right approach. So I'd like to be in front of you, again, likely early in the new year, talking about things like what are those general principles. I've named a few now, you may have more. We may put some meat around those types of principles, but I suspect my colleagues want to do something similar with their councils and say, whatever we do, even if, again, it's more formalized shared services, here are the principles we agree to.
Thank you, Mr. CEO. Thank you, Mayor Easton.
Thank you, Mayor Easton. I guess to you, so earlier this evening, we motioned to make that Dobby report public. Is there going to be a way for the public to see that report on our town website or in some way?
I think I saw it tonight as a draft
I can talk to.
for the newspaper. Madam Clerk, Mr. CEO, what do we know about that?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor. So because council has motioned to make it publicly available for tonight's discussion, we've updated our website as we speak on our
Okay.
agenda. So it is on there.
Okay, perfect. I just, we don't need to hear all the points and have Mr. Dobby discuss them all, but Yeah, I think that's important. And through you, are we going to be able to ask Mr. Dobby any questions, or?
Yes, yes.
If possible, when would that time occur?
We can do that as soon as,
Not, yeah.
Through you, Madam Mayor,
Sorry,
I'll sit down and have some water and let Mr. Dobby take the stand.
thank you very much, Mr. CAO.
Thank you, through you. Thank you, Mr. Dobby,
Sir.
for your time and patience through this.
Yeah.
I'm just curious, so, I want to ask you a question with all your experience and everything you've seen and done. Have you ever seen a time where, you know what? This is a good thing that the province is amalgamating these municipalities. They can't get it together. They can't figure it out. They don't get along. You know what? We got to force them to do it. And if that does happen, or if you've seen it happen, what's the best way to deal with that? How to manage that?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor, I've seen it happen. The province, of course, are really the father and mother of municipalities, right? We operate, you operate at their convenience almost. And I'm not being super negative in saying that if you bring forward like I'm always saying to municipalities, you really should tell the province what you want before they make up their mind on what you're going to get. And so your discussion tonight was good for that. But what they can do is they also control a lot of the revenue coming to the municipalities. And that can get interrupted if they think you need a governance change. So that's how they do it. But the biggest experience I've had was when Flamborough came to Burlington. They knew they were probably going to Hamilton, so they came and talked to Burlington. We talked to them probably for about 3 months, and we gave the province the idea, or gave them a presentation, that Burlington would welcome Flamborough, and Flamborough gave them a presentation, same presentation, that said, and we would welcome going to Burlington. So the province gave us another 3 or 4 months to study that, and we were up 2 days a week in Flamborough trying to figure out all the issues, and there are a huge number of issues. And the councillor that raised the motion, he's probably going through in his mind what all those things are and how they can change. But in the end, we did it. We thought we did wonderful work, but it wasn't wonderful enough because Flamborough ended up in Hamilton, and we did have public meetings, and they were actually fairly comfortable when you were in Flamborough, because given a choice between joining Hamilton or Burlington, they were favoring, the citizens were favoring Burlington. But in the end, the province chose Hamilton, and that was the end of that. So I just think if you will be upset with yourself if you don't put a message forward. But there's no way that it's going to be, in the 2 or 3 months you have, you cannot study all the issues and have all the answers.
No.
So if you go with the principles, as your CAO, Mike, has suggested, I think it's a great idea. And then I do think you're going to want some technical work done, and they need to keep you and the other 2 councils informed. And you give it your best shot when you get a chance to do it, and then you wait for the answer. You wait for what the province is going to do. I hope that's answered your question.
No, it does. I guess the theme is, just maintain an open line of communication and, keep all options open. So, no, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Thank you. Councillor Mikulik, any other questions? Mr. Dobby, did you have any closing comments that you wanted to make to us?
Madam Mayor, it's a long time since I've been at 3 council meetings in consecutive evenings, but I did enjoy your conversation, and this is really important in my view, so I think this was a well-run meeting tonight. Appreciate being invited. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your input. All right. Let's move on. There'll be no further discussion. I have a motion moved by, and I've changed the names because we already introduced both councilors earlier. So Councilor Timmers, would you move this motion? Councilor Mikulik, would you second it? That council receive and file for information the following presentation provided by CAO Mike Kirkopoulos and Tim L. Dobby Consulting Limited regarding shared services and provincial governance update, as well as the publicly released information update report provided by Tim L. Dobby Consulting Limited. Madam Clerk, would you please open the vote?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and the vote is now open.
Councilor Njima? Yes. Thank
You're in
you.
favor? Thank you. Councillor Brunei, you're in favor? Thank you. And I'll close that vote, and that carries.
Okay, thank you very much. The motion is carried. Item number 11 is items for consideration. We have nothing further. We have no previous council meetings to consider. There are no recommendations from committees this evening, and we have no notice of motion. There are no reports this evening from municipal officers, and there are no bylaws to consider this evening. Item number 18 is a motion to confirm the proceedings of council. We will now confirm the proceedings of the council meeting. I have a motion moved by Councillor Timmers, seconded by Councillor Brunei, that leave be given to introduce bylaw number 2023-64, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council at its meeting held Wednesday, November the 8th, 2023, being read a first, second, and third time. That bylaw number 2023-64 be enacted and passed, that the mayor and clerk sign and seal the said bylaw. Madam Clerk, would you please open the vote?
Thank you, and I'll just put that forward. Thank you. And Councillor Brunei, you're in favor? Councillor Rajima, you're in favor? Thank you.
Oh.
Mary Steen? Yes, you got it? Okay. And I'll close that vote, and that carries. Thank you.
Any comments from any members? There being none, I have a motion moved by Councillor Mikulik, seconded by Councillor Russell, that the special council meeting on November the 8th, 2023 be adjourned at 19:50 hours. Madam Clerk, would you please open the vote?
Yes. And I will put that to motion. And Councillor Rajima, and you're in favor, okay. And Councillor Timmers, and okay. Everyone's in favor, thank you. And I'll close that. And that carries, Madam Mayor, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks to everyone. Thank you to our visitors. Mr. CAO, thank you very much to staff that were here to support us. Madam Clerk, this concludes our special council meeting for this evening.